Welcome to Certified Data Engineer Associate DEA-C01 Practice Exam Number 8. You'll get 30 exam-style questions. I will read each question, then give you a 10-second countdown to review the answer choices on screen. Feel free to pause the video if you need longer. After each countdown, I will reveal the correct answer and explanation. Question 1. Tailspin Corp runs an Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL database that serves as the backend for a high-traffic web application. The application uses AWS Lambda functions that open hundreds of concurrent database connections, causing connection exhaustion errors during peak traffic. Which solution should the data engineer implement to resolve this issue with the least code changes? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Amazon RDS Proxy is specifically designed to solve connection exhaustion issues with serverless applications like Lambda. It pools and shares database connections, allowing thousands of Lambda invocations to share a small number of database connections. RDS Proxy requires only changing the database endpoint in the application configuration, resulting in minimal code changes. It also provides up to 66% faster failover for Aurora. Aurora Serverless V8 provides compute auto-scaling, but does not inherently solve connection pooling issues. Increasing max connections has limits and can degrade database performance due to memory overhead. Elasticache would reduce read connections, but requires significant application code changes to implement caching logic and does not address write connection exhaustion. Question 2. A data engineer at Northwind Financial is designing a Glue ETL job that reads from a JDBC source containing 500 million rows. The source table has a monotonically increasing transaction ID column. The job runs daily and should only process new records added since the last successful run. What should the data engineer configure to achieve incremental processing with the least operational effort? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Glue job bookmarks are the built-in mechanism for tracking incremental processing state. For JDBC sources, bookmarks track bookmark key columns that must be monotonically increasing or decreasing, which transaction ID satisfies. The job.init call loads the previous bookmark state, and job.commit saves the updated state after successful processing. This requires no additional infrastructure or custom code. Storing the last processed ID in DynamoDB works but requires custom code to manage state, adding operational overhead. S3 event notifications are for S3-based sources, not JDBC sources. Glue crawlers with crawl event mode detect new S3 objects, not new rows in a JDBC database table. Question 3. A data engineering team has a stored procedure in Amazon Redshift. A data analyst who is already a database user needs permission to execute the procedure for analysis purposes. How should access be granted following the principle of least privilege? Select 1 answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. The execute privilege in Amazon Redshift is the specific permission that controls whether a user can invoke a stored procedure. Granting execute on only the specific procedure provides exactly the access needed without exposing any other capabilities. The usage privilege on a schema grants access to objects within the schema, but does not itself allow executing stored procedures. It may be a prerequisite in some configurations, but is not the permission that enables execution. Insert, update, and delete are data manipulation privileges on tables that allow modifying data directly. They do not grant the ability to call stored procedures and provide broader underlying table access than required. The references privilege is used for creating foreign key constraints that reference another table and has no relationship to stored procedure invocation. Question 4. Kinesis Pharmaceuticals runs Apache Spark jobs on Amazon EMR to process clinical trial data. The cluster has 3 core nodes and 10 task nodes. The team wants to minimize costs by using Spot instances where possible without risking data loss. Which node configuration strategy should the team implement? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The primary node runs the name node and resource manager, and core nodes store HDFS data, making both critical for cluster stability and data integrity. These should use on-demand instances. Task nodes only run compute tasks and do not store HDFS data, so their interruption does not cause data loss, making them ideal for Spot instances. EMRFS consistent view is no longer needed since S3 achieved strong consistency in December 2020, and it does not protect HDFS data on core nodes from Spot termination. Using Spot for the primary node risks cluster failure since there is only one primary node. Reserved instances may be cost-effective long-term, but the scenario describes variable task node counts, and Spot instances provide the greatest savings for task nodes. Question 5. Tailspin Energy has a Kinesis data stream receiving sensor readings from 10,000 IoT devices. The data engineer notices that the CloudWatch metric getRecords.iterator age milliseconds is consistently increasing over time, indicating that consumers are falling behind. The stream has 50 shards in provisioned mode and a single KCL application consuming data. Which action should the data engineer take to resolve the consumer lag? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. The KCL assigns 1 worker per shard, so if the KCL application is running on fewer instances than there are shards, some workers must process multiple shards, creating a bottleneck. Increasing the number of eSeatWo instances to match or approach the shard count allows each instance to dedicate resources to fewer shards, improving processing throughput and reducing iterator age. Increasing the retention period provides a larger window before data expires, but does not address the root cause of consumer lag. The data is not being processed fast enough. Splitting shards increases write capacity, but does not directly address consumer processing speed if the issue is insufficient consumer compute resources. Enhanced fanout provides dedicated 2 MB/s per consumer per shard, which helps when multiple consumers compete for read throughput. But with a single KCL application, the shared throughput limit of 5 getRecords calls per second per shard is typically sufficient if the consumer compute capacity matches the shard count. Question 6. A company ingests data through Kinesis data streams into S3 and uses Lambda to process records. During peak times, the iterator age metric increases significantly. Which 3 solutions improve processing performance? Select 3. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B and option E. A rising iterator age metric indicates that Lambda is falling behind in consuming records from the stream. Adding shards increases the stream's total throughput capacity and creates more parallelism since each shard can be processed by a separate Lambda invocation concurrently. The parallelization factor controls how many concurrent Lambda invocations are allowed per shard, and tuning this value can significantly increase throughput on each shard without adding infrastructure. Enhanced fanout allocates a dedicated 2 MB per second read throughput per shard to the registered Lambda consumer using HTTP/2, eliminating read bandwidth contention with other consumers and reducing the time Lambda waits for records. Raising a support ticket for provisioned concurrency is not directly relevant to the iterator age problem, which is about read throughput capacity rather than Lambda cold start latency. Decreasing shards reduces capacity and would worsen iterator age. Switching to provisioned capacity mode alone without changing shard count does not add new capacity. Question 7. Fabricam Healthcare operates an Amazon EMR cluster for processing genomic datasets. The cluster runs long-running Spark jobs that take 8 hours. The data engineer needs to reduce costs while maintaining reliability for data processing. The genomic data is stored in Amazon S3 using EMRFS. Which combination of actions should the data engineer take to optimize costs while minimizing the risk of data loss and job failure? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option B and Option D. Using spot instances for task nodes is the recommended best practice for cost optimization on EMR because task nodes are stateless and do not store HDFS data, so their termination does not cause data loss. Instance fleets allow specifying multiple instance types, improving spot availability. Using on-demand instances for primary and core nodes ensures cluster stability since the primary node controls the cluster and core nodes store HDFS data. Spot instances for core nodes risk HDFS data loss if instances are terminated. Storing intermediate results in HDFS on core nodes does not reduce costs and adds data loss risk. Yarn node labels ensure application masters run on core nodes to survive task node terminations, but this is automatically configured in EMR5X releases and is less impactful than the instance purchasing strategy itself. Question 8. Litware Banking uses AWS CloudTrail to audit access to their S3 data lake containing financial transaction data. The security team discovers that CloudTrail is only logging management events bucket creation, policy changes, but not tracking who accessed specific objects in the transaction data buckets. What should the data engineer configure to capture object-level access activity? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is Option C. CloudTrail data events for S3 capture object-level API activity, including getObject, putObject, and deleteObject operations. By default, CloudTrail only logs management events. Data events must be explicitly enabled and incur additional cost. Specifying read-only event selectors targeted at the transaction data buckets captures who access specific objects, while limiting costs by not logging write events and not tracking all buckets in the account. S3 server access logging provides access records, but in a less structured format, without integration into the CloudTrail audit framework, and without the cross-service analysis capabilities of CloudTrail Lake. OzConfig monitors configuration changes to resources, like bucket settings, not object-level data access events. Macy discovers and classifies sensitive data in S3, but does not provide an audit trail of who accessed specific objects. It identifies data, not access patterns. Question 9. A data engineer at Contoso Retail is configuring Amazon S3 replication for their data lake. The source bucket in ASYS-1 contains critical transaction data encrypted with SSCKMS using a customer-managed key. The data must be replicated to a bucket in EUS-1 for disaster recovery. Which requirements must be met for the replication to work correctly? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option A and Option C. S3 cross-region replication has 2 mandatory requirements in this scenario. First, versioning must be enabled on both source and destination buckets, as replication relies on version IDs to track objects. Second, when the source uses SSCKMS encryption, the replication IAM role must have KMS decrypt permissions on the source KMS key to read the data and KMS encrypt permissions on the destination region's KMS key to re-encrypt the objects. KMS keys are region-specific, so cross-region replication cannot use the same KMS key, meaning different customer-managed keys are needed in each region. Transfer acceleration is a separate feature for improving upload speeds and is not required for replication. The destination bucket can use SSCKMS with a different key and does not need to switch to SSCS3. Question 10. A manufacturing company needs to combine and query data from Amazon TimeStream and Amazon Redshift tables using SQL with the least operational overhead. Which solution meets this requirement? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Amazon Athena Federated Query uses AWS Lambda-based connectors to query data sources outside of S3, including Amazon TimeStream, DynamoDB, relational databases, and Redshift. A single Athena SQL query can join data from TimeStream and Redshift simultaneously without moving data or building custom pipelines. The connectors return data in Apache Arrow format and integrate transparently with the Athena query engine. Redshift Federated Query supports external connections to RDS and Aurora databases via JDBC, but does not support Amazon TimeStream as a federated source, making it architecturally incapable of the cross-service join described. Redshift Spectrum queries data stored in S3 using external tables defined in the Glue data catalog. It cannot connect to or query Amazon TimeStream directly. Exporting TimeStream data to S3 and loading it into Redshift via copy introduces manual orchestration steps, storage costs, and data freshness delays, none of which are present in the Athena Federated Query approach. Question 11. Fabricam Analytics is running an AWS Glue ETL job that reads data from an Amazon RDS MySQL database using a JDBC connection. The job currently reads the entire table for each run, taking over 4 hours to complete. The table has an auto-incrementing integer column named record id and receives approximately 500,000 new records daily. The data engineer needs to reduce the job runtime to under 30 minutes by processing only new records since the last run. Which approach should the data engineer implement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Oz Glue job bookmarks track the last processed data for JDBC sources using a bookmark key column that must be monotonically increasing or decreasing. The auto-incrementing record id column is ideal for this purpose. When enabled, the bookmark tracks the last processed record id value, and subsequent runs automatically filter to only process new records. The job.init and job.commit calls are required to initialize and persist the bookmark state. CloudWatch events cannot monitor RDS table row counts directly. Hardcoding dates in pushed-on predicates requires manual updates for each run and does not automatically track progress. Building custom tracking logic in DynamoDB duplicates the functionality that job bookmarks provide natively, adding unnecessary code complexity and maintenance. Question 12. A data engineering team analyzing Amazon Redshift performance wants to identify conditions that might indicate query failures or suboptimal query performance. Which system table view should they use? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. SDL Alert Event Log records alerts generated by the Redshift Query Optimizer when it detects conditions that could indicate performance issues, such as nested loops, missing statistics, or hash joins on large datasets. Querying this view surfaces actionable warnings that point directly to optimization opportunities. SDL usage control logs changes to WLM configuration and records when queries are paused or canceled due to WLM rules, which is useful for WLM administration, but not for identifying optimizer-generated performance alerts. SDL Query METRICS provides a snapshot of current query queue activity and active query metrics, not historical alert events. SDL WLM Query records query execution details like CPU time, rows processed, and disk spill within WLM service classes, which supports performance analysis but does not surface optimizer-generated alert events. Question 13. Contoso needs to build a data lake for Apache Parquet data already stored in S3. Data scientists need granular access controls, and the solution must be implemented quickly and cost-effectively. Which solution best meets these requirements? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Since the Parquet data already exists in S3, a glue crawler automatically discovers the schema from the existing files and creates table definitions in the glue data catalog without manual schema specification. Registering the S3 path in lake formation designates it as a data lake location, after which column, row, and table-level permissions can be granted to individual IAM users, groups, or roles through a simple grant interface. This approach requires no data movement and leverages existing storage. Lake formation blueprints support importing data from relational databases via JDBC, including MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle, and SQL Server. S3 is explicitly not a supported source for blueprints, making this option architecturally incorrect. Lake formation requires registering the specific S3 path prefix where the data resides, not just the bucket name. Registering only the bucket may result in incomplete coverage or configuration errors depending on how the bucket is structured. MWAA orchestrates scheduled data processing workflows and has no capability for data cataloging, schema discovery, or the granular access permission management that lake formation provides. Question 14. Litware Corp uses Amazon QuickSight Enterprise Edition to deliver dashboards to 500 business users across multiple departments. The marketing department should only see marketing campaign data, while the finance department should only see financial data. Additionally, certain columns containing salary information must be hidden from all departments except HR. How should the data engineer implement these access controls with the least operational overhead? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Row-level security combined with column-level security in QuickSight Enterprise Edition provides the most efficient approach. RLS rules filter rows based on the user's department membership, ensuring each department only sees their relevant data. CLS restricts specific columns like salary to the HR group. Both features are managed centrally within QuickSight without duplicating datasets or dashboards. Creating separate datasets for each department increases operational overhead with multiple datasets to maintain and refresh. Using S3 bucket prefixes and IAM policies does not integrate with QuickSight's native access controls and requires data duplication. Building separate dashboards for each department creates significant maintenance burden and does not scale as departments are added. Question 15. Northwind Energy has an Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL database serving as the backend for their energy trading platform. During peak trading hours, thousands of concurrent Lambda functions connect to the database, causing connection exhaustion errors. The data engineer needs to resolve the connection issue while minimizing changes to the existing Lambda code. What should the data engineer do? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Amazon RDS Proxy is specifically designed to solve the connection exhaustion problem that occurs when serverless applications like Lambda create many short-lived database connections. RDS Proxy maintains a pool of established connections to the database and multiplexes application connections across this pool, dramatically reducing the number of actual database connections. Lambda functions only need to change their connection endpoint to the proxy endpoint, requiring minimal code changes. RDS Proxy also provides up to 66% faster failover for Aurora. Increasing max connections has hard limits based on instance memory and can degrade database performance when too many connections are active simultaneously. Aurora serverless VTWO scales compute and storage, but does not solve the connection pooling problem since it still has connection limits. Lambda global variables can reuse connections across warm invocations of the same execution environment, but each concurrent Lambda execution still requires its own connection, so this approach does not solve the problem at scale with thousands of concurrent functions. Question 16. A company has S3 data with duplicate customer signups, duplicate products, and other fuzzy duplicates that a human could identify as matches even when fields do not match exactly. Which solution eliminates these duplicates with the least operational overhead? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The AWS Glue Find Matches ML transform uses machine learning to identify matching or duplicate records even when fields do not match exactly, such as name spelling variations, address differences, or missing data. It does not require writing any code. Engineers teach the model by labeling a sample CSV with match and non-match examples, and Glue handles the rest. This is specifically designed for fuzzy record matching that a human could identify. The Python dedupe library can perform similar matching, but requires writing and maintaining custom Python code for training and applying the model. Data frame drop duplicates removes only exact row duplicates and cannot identify fuzzy matches where values differ slightly, such as John James versus Johnny James. The Python record linkage library provides record matching capabilities, but similarly requires significant custom coding and is less integrated with the AWS data pipeline ecosystem. Question 17. A company is migrating its AWS Glue Databrew project to a new AWS account. The new team must remove the security group that enabled Databrew to connect to RDS databases and VPC resources in the old account. What must they do first? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. A security group in AWS cannot be deleted while it is still associated with any resource or referenced by rules in other security groups. To safely remove the Databrew security group, it must first be detached from all resources such as RDS instances and the Databrew VPC configuration, and any inbound or outbound rules in other security groups that reference it by ID must be deleted. Security groups do not have a deletion protection feature in Security Hub. Deletion protection applies to specific resources like RDS instances and EC01 instances, not to security groups themselves. Reconfiguring the VPC to use a new security group does not remove the old group's dependencies if it is still attached to resources or referenced by other rules. Deleting an ENI associated with Databrew would disrupt active network connectivity and does not automatically allow the security group to be deleted if other associations remain. Question 18. A data engineer at Litware Corp is designing a multi-account data mesh architecture on AWS. 3 business unit accounts each have their own Amazon Redshift serverless workgroups with sensitive data. The central data governance account needs to provide marketing analysts with access to only specific columns from tables across all 3 accounts without duplicating data. Which approach meets these requirements? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Creating views with only the required columns in each business unit's Redshift data share ensures that sensitive columns are never exposed outside the source account. Registering these data shares in Lake Formation in the governance account provides centralized permission management and allows marketing analysts to access the shared data through Lake Formation's fine-grained access control without data duplication. Using Glue ETL to extract and load data creates data copies, adding storage costs, staleness, and ongoing maintenance. Sharing full tables and relying solely on Lake Formation column filters exposes the underlying full table data in the data share, which is less secure than restricting at the view level in the source account. Cross-account S3 replication of Redshift managed storage data is not a supported mechanism for Redshift data sharing. Question 19. A manufacturing company uses Amazon Redshift for bi-weekly production analytics and needs to audit all SQL queries, user actions, and database object changes for compliance. Which solution satisfies these requirements with the least operational overhead? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Amazon Redshift's built-in audit logging captures 3 types of logs stored in S3. Connection logs recording all authentication attempts and disconnections, user logs tracking changes to database user definitions, and user activity logs recording every query before execution. These logs directly satisfy the requirement to capture SQL queries, user actions, and database object changes. Oz CloudTrail complements this by recording all Redshift API calls, including caller identity, source IP, and request parameters, creating a complete audit trail covering both database-level activity and infrastructure-level changes. Using Lambda to parse CloudWatch logs requires custom development and maintenance, and CloudWatch does not capture the full scope of Redshift database activity that built-in audit logging provides. Oz Config monitors resource configuration changes over time, but does not capture SQL execution or user activity logs within Redshift. CloudWatch alarms with SNS focus on threshold-based alerting from metrics rather than comprehensive audit logging of database transactions. Question 20. Litware Commerce runs an Amazon managed service for Apache Flink application processing e-commerce clickstream data from Kinesis data streams. The application uses event time processing with watermarks. During a recent sale event, the application produced incorrect aggregation results because a significant number of events arrived after the watermark had advanced past their event timestamps. Which approach correctly handles these late arriving events? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Apache Flink supports configuring allowed lateness on window operators, which keeps Windows state open for a specified duration after the watermark passes the Windows end time. Events arriving within the allowed lateness period trigger updated results. Events arriving after the allowed lateness can be captured via side outputs for separate processing or auditing. Increasing Kinesis retention does not help because the issue is about event time watermarks within Flink, not data availability in the stream. Switching to processing time eliminates the ability to produce correct results based on when events actually occurred, which defeats the purpose of event time processing for accurate analytics. Adding more KPUs increases processing capacity, but does not address the fundamental issue of events arriving with timestamps behind the current watermark position. That is the end of practice exam number 8. Review the questions you missed, then come back for the next batch.